Welcome everyone. I'm Jeffrey Goodman, Director of Marketing and Development for the YMCA of Northwest Louisiana, and we're here today for Shreveport-Bossier, my city, my community, my home. My guest today is Keith Burton, and I'm really excited to sit down and talk about Shreveport-Bossier through the lens of Keith. So thanks for making the time when I know you're a super busy individual.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. All right, Keith. So, and feel free to correct me if I'm incorrect on anything I say. You're the Chief Academic Officer for Caddo Parish Public Schools. I believe you were a 31-year veteran of Caddo schools.
That's correct.
Prior to serving as Chief Academic Officer, among other things, you served as the principal of Fairfield Elementary School, South Highlands, and Caddo Middle Magnet. I want to cover a number of different programs with you today, so let's start here. You serve on the Advisory Council of Volunteers of America's Communities and Schools, or CIS as many people know it. I pulled this from VOA's website. In Caddo Parish, approximately 70% of students live in poverty. A licensed partnership between Volunteers of America North Louisiana and Communities and Schools, the largest and most effective dropout prevention organization, is aimed at surrounding these students with a community of support, empowering them to stay in school and achieve in life. Talk to me, if you could, about CIS, some of the programs it offers, and why it is so important that we have organizations like it in our schools.
Yeah, Community and Schools, first of all, the partnership with Community and Schools, which is a national organization, and VOA is unique in itself. Typically, Community and Schools will partner directly with the school system, but in order to be able to have a broader reach, Volunteers of America partnered with Community and Schools to be able to provide additional resources to really be able to make a greater difference in Shreveport-Bossier area. What we have attempted to do in Caddo Parish is, first of all, work backwards. We looked at where are our kids progressing, especially those that have the greatest poverty, and typically those are focused into two high schools, Woodlawn High School and Booker T. Washington. So we really worked backwards from there. Where are the feeder patterns to those two schools? And then what are the supports that we could provide, especially to elementary students first, to be able to wrap around services to them to build, first of all, or take down any barriers that they're having. CIS is focused in three areas. They're focused, first of all, on academics. Do we have a group of students who are struggling academically? And if we nurture them in that area, if we provide supports, whether that be through additional time, whether that be through tutoring, being able to be an advocate for that student with teachers and administration, we know that that'll boost that child's academic performance. The second thing is attendance. It's very easy to say we just need students to come to school, but many times they're so challenged in their home, whether that be, there may be an issue with uniforms, there may be an issue with transportation, there may be an issue just with, a parent or a guardian or grandmother working, and that child's getting up on their own to get to school. And so having a CIS advocate on site focused on attendance and ensuring that a group of students who are challenged in that area have support is important. The third area is discipline, ensuring that we have kids who are responding appropriately in the classrooms and in the hallways and in that school environment is really important. So CIS is extremely impactful. What we have found in a slow rollout, one of the things that Dr. Gorey has really emphasized to all of us is he does not want to go very wide quickly. He would rather stay very focused and go very deep with support. So being able to look at, when you look at Atkins or you look at Oak Park or you look at, Broadmoor just recently, the ability to impact students around those three major areas have been huge. Again, We also use Carolyn Spake-Gonzalez, which is an external assessor for us to be able, not from VOA's eyes or not from Caddo School's eyes, but an external researcher looking at the data and saying, with this control group versus our CIS students, are we making a difference? And we're really seeing a tremendous difference in all three areas. Now, along with anything else, it depends on buy-in of the principal. So we're always trying to help that principal understand the role of an external partner in impacting students. It's also sometimes we run into vacancies either of CIS staff or with Caddo Parish staff, and so when we don't see the data turn as we want to, typically we can boil it down to one of those two issues. It's either an administrative buy-in problem or there's been some key vacancies with staff. But a great partnership and one that's making a tremendous impact in those schools.
And just a couple of questions on top of what you just said. One, can you talk to me a little bit about the specifics of how the CIS advocates work in some of those areas? How do they work in academics, or how do they work in attendance, or how do they work in discipline? And then my other question was just with Carolyn's work, are her metric, is she trying to evaluate after one academic year? Is she evaluating daily? Is she evaluating weekly? Is she evaluating monthly? Just what does that process look like a little bit?
Okay. First of all, there's a CIS coordinator on site. And so that person works for CIS, not the school board, and they are on site. But yet we treat them just like a staff member. They then in turn look at student data, and then based upon kids who have the greatest needs, they bring on a caseload. And so they work with parents or guardians to be able to get permission to work with those students. And then they build a caseload around those three major areas: attendance, discipline, and academics. Each student, and there are some students that may have multiple challenges in all of those areas. And they work very, very closely with the classroom teacher. They also try to be that liaison between the school or the classroom and that child's home. They also work with other partners, whether that be, let's say that student is having social emotional challenges and may have a counselor on the side. That liaison works between the school and that child's counselor. They also work with even churches and other community organizations that may be touching that child in any way. As far as Carolyn's work does, first of all, she reports to the entire board every year. She actually, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, I think she does a report twice a year. She also comes in to our executive staff, to Dr. Gorey and myself, and presents the information to make sure that we are aware of schools that are growing, and we kind of are able then to walk away and kind of dig into why some are having a greater impact than others. She is looking at it not only from the lens of a 9 weeks or a quarter, but she's also looking at it for the entire year. She's not looking at it at a day-to-day. It's not possible. So looking at longitudinally, how are we impacting groups of students? Also looking at cohorts. When a child leaves, from one grade and goes to another, what's the impact of those supports from grade level to grade level?
Great. So my next question is, for the moneyed community of Caddo Parish that may not understand what life looks like at some of our schools or in some of the homes or neighborhoods of some of our students, can you describe it for us?
Anytime you're looking at a population where 70% of students are coming from poverty, it is incredible the amount of challenges that some of our families have. We are fighting generational poverty, where we have families that are in just cycles of not only poverty, but many times dysfunction because of just the lack of support and systems, not only within their home, but within their area. One of the most powerful, I think, activities that I ever did with the principal was put staff members on a bus, and we actually drove through neighborhoods where we serve students. And you may say, well, wait, Keith, you just told us you were at Middle Magnet, or you were at South Highlands, you were at Fairfield. Those are all magnet schools. That's a selective population. But we drew from neighborhoods all around this area, and so to be able to go down in depths of Cedar Grove and look at poverty there. I've also had friends tell me who have worked in Dallas, or they've worked in Houston, and now they're working in Shreveport, that, Keith, we've never seen poverty like we have locally. We have students who can go weeks without running water in their homes. And 2022, that just it amazes me that we're in a situation like that. But not only, I don't think the poverty is the greatest issue as much as now what we're finding with, of course, the impact of drug use and the impact of mental health. It's one thing to come from a challenged environment, but if you have healthy people within that challenged environment, then the likelihood of you succeeding is pretty strong. Many of our students that are coming in not only from very impoverished neighborhoods, but they're also living in families that have extreme amount of dysfunction and mental illness. So it's important for us as a school district to be able to work closely with those families as very early as possible. That's why we're a big advocate of birth to 3 education. We want to be able to break the cycle of dysfunction and offer high intensity, quality daycare and early childhood education to families, because there's no need for a family or for a child to grow up in this dysfunction when there are so many partners and opportunities available for them.
Great. So that leads me into my next question. You're part of Community Foundation's Early Childhood Education Caddo Fund Initiative Steering Committee. In short, this initiative seeks to create more equity among our Caddo Parish students by providing access for all our students to quality childcare and early education. Mm-hmm. I recently had Clay Walker on as a guest, who said that when 14-year-olds come to him, it's too late. In your opinion, programmatically, what are some things we can do for our 6 to 13-year-olds that level the playing field in ways similar to the incredible work you've done for 0 to 5-year-olds with Community Foundation's Early Start initiative?
Well, I think when you're talking about 6 to 14-year-olds, that's probably the age span that's the greatest challenge. And Clay is right. I mean, if we are not addressing those issues before they're 14, they really are lost. One of the main things I think is building a program around 2 structures. One is relationships. Those individuals, especially males in that grade level or grade span, must have a mentor. They must have a relationship with someone who is going to be able to be there for them, to be able to provide guidance to them, not only academically, but also just with life decisions and mentoring them on correct responses. The second thing is exposure to experiences. You only know what you know. And if I'm living in a land of dysfunction in my home, I'm at a school where possibly, let's say, there's a long-term sub, I do not have someone that's a day-to-day strong instructor, I'm doomed. There is no way that I'm going to be able to have those that success. And so one of the things that we're wanting to do is ensuring that, first of all, we provide that high-quality teacher every day. That's one of our goals. Many of our classrooms for years and years and years had a turnover of subs day in and day out. I know that's not a part of your question, but many of the times the impact of that teacher who comes day in and day out and who is that mentor and develops that relationship, to me, that's the greatest impact we can do as a school system, especially around some of those grade levels. The other thing is, I think we have to be able to be aware of trauma and not be responsive to trauma. We are building, and I know you've said you've talked to Casey and others, one of the big shifts that we're making in our district is not just simply responding to a child that's having trauma, but being trauma aware so that we are looking at those triggers so that we can, no matter if I'm a bus driver, no matter if I'm a school secretary or a cafeteria clerk, when a child gets off that bus, walks through the classroom or walks through that school, I'm able to identify, something's not right, and I can rescue that child before they then go into a situation where they're going to be adjudicated through a discipline program. So that's important that we are building awareness and we're building those relationships. Now, as far as building exposure, we want those kids to be exposed to as many opportunities as possible. What do I mean by that? First of all, we want to make sure that we are structuring experiences through field trips. They need to be able to get outside of their neighborhood, outside of their school, and see this city. We have students in Caddo Parish that have never been to Bossier. We have students in Bossier that have never been to Caddo. We've got to be able to broaden that experience. And your audience may say that I just don't believe in 2022 that's the case. I can remember several years ago we were taking a group of students to Washington, D.C. These were our amazing SHAKE students. And I was with a girl who was in 5th grade, and we were in the Atlanta airport. We got to a set of escalators, and she got on the escalators, and it scared her to death. She immediately grabbed the rail, her suitcase dropped, and I said, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" She said, "The stairs are moving." She had never been on an escalator, and this child was 10 or 11 years old. So building experiences not only within our city, but also of what's available, making sure that they're walking on campuses of higher education, that they're walking to LSU, they're walking the campus of LSUS and Centenary and Southern and Grambling and Louisiana Tech. Also, they're aware of some of the opportunities that are available to them, even if they don't go to college. Are they aware of the career and technical education opportunities? And what does that mean? What does it take to get that? And also, when they're walking through those experiences and being exposed, that they're seeing people that look like them. We need to be very intentional that we are creating opportunities where a child who is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old is able to see someone that looks like them, that can mentor them and provide an opportunity for to build a passion for them for the rest of their lives.
And I know a little bit about ACEs. Tell me a little bit about how we're educating our bus driver or cafeteria worker to be more proactive versus reactive to trauma.
Well, first of all, understanding that that child is not an at-risk child. That child is a child who is in an at-risk environment. And so first of all, just educating them, it's now part of our required training for all teachers and all staff, that they go through this training so that they are aware of those triggers. Also, when a child is triggered and is responding like that we are, first of all, we're stopping, we're removing them early, and we're questioning what is going on. How can we help you? What is needed? That is really, I think, the core aspect of shifting from just a trauma responsive to a trauma-informed society.
And explain that. Sorry, so an at-risk child versus whatever you just said. Just clarify that a little bit for me.
Yeah, many times we look at populations of students, whether they're from a certain school or they're in a certain demographic or let's say poverty level, and suddenly we almost shackle them with low expectations. And so one of the things that we have to be able to do is ensure that we understand that may be a child that's in a very troubled situation. Yes, they may be in poverty. Yes, they may come from a dysfunctional home. Yes, they may be in a school that's been labeled as a failing school. But that child is not an at-risk child. That child is just in an at-risk situation. And so because of that, what we need to do is attack the situation and the causes of those situations, not necessarily perpetuate the child's situation because of really an unfair placement.
Thanks.
I never want a child to be shackled by their zip code. That's one of the things that I think is the greatest response that we have in education, because education, the best definition I ever gave my own kids about the definition of education is simply gives you freedom to make choices. You have the ability to make choices in your life, not someone else making the choices for you. And so we as educators need to make sure that we keep that philosophy in mind as we're working with students that do come from these at-risk situations.
Thanks. That makes sense.
Okay.
Like some of our community's other more complex issues, I fully realize that there's no one magic bullet that will quickly propel Caddo Parish to be one of the highest ranked public school systems in the country. But if money were no issue, programmatically, what would be other game changers to our system and students like CIS and Community Foundation's Early Start initiative? And I know you've covered some of this, but if there are other things that maybe you'd want to explore or talk about.
Yeah, I think the greatest impact that we can provide for a child's a high quality teacher. So looking at, I would if money is off the table and I could really just wave a magic wand or click my heels and get anything I would want, I would think first of all, what can we do to ensure that every single classroom has a knowledgeable, qualified, highly effective teacher in front of children. I mean, that really is the very first thing. So that's one of the questions we ask ourselves every week. Where are our classrooms that are in trouble because either they've had someone retire, they've had a long-term sub in a classroom for a period of time, there's been turnover of whatever reason. Where are those classrooms and what are we doing about it? The second thing besides staff is time. Kids can learn, they need time in order to learn. So one of the key questions we ask is, in our academic area, is are we teaching the right thing, the right way, and how do we know it? Okay, and so we are looking at a series of benchmarks and assessments to constantly refine our approach to instruction to ensure that students are growing, because what we're wanting is to accelerate, especially coming from the recent pandemic. We're wanting to not only provide that child with a year's worth of education, but we want to accelerate that learning. That's one of the reasons why first of all, we started this year in elementary and middle schools on August 1st. Rather than a typical school year, so we gave them more time. We've also identified those grade levels that need the greatest amount of time, and that's especially, as you just mentioned earlier, with the grade span, upper elementary and middle school. We doubled the amount of math minutes. We double blocked mathematics in middle school. We saw on test scores, a recent test release and last year's release, that our priority in that area has paid. It was a great return on investment, so it's one of the best returns we can do. And then the last thing, really, which is the easiest, is just providing the resources needed, and especially with all of the money that's come from the federal government in response to COVID-19. There's really no excuse for a school not to have everything they need as far as technology. We've never been as technology rich as we are now. Every child has a tier 1, a top rated curriculum that they are learning from that's tied to national standards and of course tied directly to Louisiana state standards. So when we look at quality, I think it's ensuring that whatever we're doing is putting that high quality teacher and leader in front of that kid. Also time, ensuring there's no time lost, and that we are giving kids additional time as needed in the area of literacy and math. And then the third thing, I would think of all the resources, the tools by which that high quality staff member and that student can achieve as much as possible.
We'll get a little more general now. What are some areas that are more challenging today in Caddo Parish Public Schools than they have been at other times during your 31-year career?
I would think the greatest challenge now is there used to be a greater, I think, appreciation of the classroom teacher than there is now. When I first started and when I was principal, many times, a parent could be frustrated, a parent could be upset over an issue, but they never really would attack a teacher as we're seeing now. I was talking to a brand new fifth grade teacher yesterday, and she doesn't teach in Caddo, she teaches in Dallas, and she was just explaining what she was going through, and it was not the kids that were the greatest issues. It was not, her staff members or her principal or administration. Her greatest challenge came from parents, and it was questioning her ability, questioning her decisions, no matter what she did. She said, "Miss Burton, I just feel like I'm failing because I'm being questioned at every turn." So I think the lack of appreciation for what it means to be a classroom teacher in 2022 is something that I think is one of our greatest challenges. We have to build back that profession. We are not a profession of desperation. I tell our brand new teachers when I get a chance to stand in front of them, first of all, they're the most important profession in the world. I mean, they have the opportunity to touch a child and be able to create not only knowledge, but passion and opportunities for a child to do whatever they want. But many times first of all, that teacher has to respect the profession and lead and teach in a way that also builds it with around, but the community as a whole, we must really, I think, have a reset around the appreciation of what it takes to teach in today's time.
I'm curious, my wife is a school teacher, I'm curious, what do you attribute that societal shift to? When and how did that change the way that a lot of people view teachers?
And I don't think it's just teachers. I think it's authority in general. If we look at how society responds to whether it's a police officer or responds to a manager or responds to really any group that's in authority, they don't respond well to them nowadays. They're very challenged around that. So I really think that's really kind of more a reflection of society more than anything else.
All right, so I'm down to my last question with you, which is basically the opposite of what I just asked you. And the question is, what are some areas that are better today than they have been at other times during your 31-year career?
Well, we could go for a while here.
We got plenty of time.
And driving over here this morning, I had no idea what you were going to ask. But one of the things I wanted to make sure and get across is, too many times when I come on a program like this, where we have the opportunity to speak in the public, we're only speaking about the challenges. We really never talk about the successes. There are so many great things that are going on in our area, in our community, that we should be very, very proud of. First of all, let's just start in Louisiana. Now, we are a state, of course, that has great challenges around poverty, and we could spend a lot of time there. But one of the things that I think that our citizens need to know is our accountability system in Louisiana, how we grade schools, the exams and tests that our kids take that then equates to a letter grade or some status, is comparable to any state in America. I mean, they can take our accountability system and really compare it to the Northeast. It's almost laughable when we compare our accountability system to some neighbors around, because the tests that they are taking, the letter grades that they are using, is not nearly as rigorous as what we're using in our state. And one of the things I wish I could do each year would be to give board members and really any community member an 8th grade LEAP math test and be able for them to sit down and really appreciate what we are expecting from really third grade all the way through high school. I mean, it is very rigorous, very challenging, and our kids are holding their own. Now, do we have a long way to go? Absolutely. So first of all, state-wise, I think we've got some really bright people. Dr. Brumley's doing an outstanding job trying to balance the needs of schools versus the needs of the business community and so on and so forth. But a lot of good things going on in the state. As far as Caddo in itself, first of all, you got to start with Dr. Gorey. I mean, anybody that spends any time with him will tell you he's dynamic, he's positive, he wants the very best for every student in our city, no matter their zip code, no matter what school or what they look like. He wants the very best for them. So when you start with a leader like that, then everything else kind of works itself out. Other things, we just celebrated, matter of fact, last week test scores were released. Our district grew in all 4 major areas, which is incredible. We maintained a very high progression grade, which was outstanding. Not only, we're a C district. We were very close before the pandemic of becoming a B district. We'll be back on our way to that, but we grew in all major areas.
What are those 4 areas, just quickly?
Well, just when you look at science, social studies, mathematics,
Gotcha.
those 4 content areas. We also have a very high graduation rate. We've now met the Caddo Parish record for graduation rate. We still have students that are scoring perfect ACTs in multiple high schools around our district. And the other thing I think I'm most proud of is there now seems to be a cohesion, some unison around community response and our work. There's trust when you look at community partners in our schools and our school board. There's trust there. And when you have trust, then you can go into better conversations, because you can have honest conversations where you can really look and attack data, attack problems, and not worry about someone's value judgment or hidden agenda. So I think we've got high levels of trust. And the other thing is, when we look at needs around staffing, even though we are still going to always struggle, I think, ensuring that we have, I don't think any of us are going to be happy unless we have every single classroom filled with a high quality teacher. We will never be satisfied. But when we look at the impact of retirement and the flight out of teaching across the nation, we did not find that in Caddo Parish. And first of all, I think that's due to a very assertive recruiting platform. Our HR department's led by Lisa Wolf. Dr. Karen Peace leads our recruiting effort. A lot of what they've done has been tremendous as far as working with not only leaders of higher education, but also building within our own school system mentoring opportunities and being able to identify those that are interested in going into classrooms and be teachers, as well as looking at what are some of the degree professionals that we had in our buildings, paraprofessionals. We had a lot of bus drivers who had a college degree, but yet just never knew the opportunity that they had to become teachers. And so very pleased about that.
And this wasn't a question I was going to ask you, but as I'm sitting here, I think I have to ask you. So I've had one of your students on as a guest. I certainly would like to have other students as we move forward. Sure. As I look around, one of our biggest challenges as a community is that we lose a lot of our best and brightest. From your perspective, what can we do as a community to do a better job of holding on in the future to holding on more in the future to some of our best and brightest?
Yeah, well, I think it definitely goes to opportunity. So we must be able to build industry. We must be able to build the job market so that when a student does either graduate from high school or a technical school or a four-year college, that there's interest in coming back. I think already there's been a shift with the attack on crime and ensuring that our communities are safer. But then I think we as a community, we've got to do a better job of being pleased with what we have in this area. We have some dynamic, first of all, resources, Now, do we have some needs? Absolutely. But if we're focused on the needs and building out a long-term plan, there's no reason why we can't build a community that'll attract all of our graduates to come back. But it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some focus, and it's going to take buy-in from every single part of this community.
Well, thanks, Keith. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for all
Thank
you're
you for the
doing.
invitation.
We're super fortunate to have you.
Thank you.
Keep it up.
All right, appreciate you.
Thank you.